And welcome back, Bears fans, to another episode of the Bears Brothers podcast. This is our second opponent preview show in which we are calling Are They Who We Think They Are? And tonight we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Bears' upcoming opponent, the Philadelphia Eagles. And we're also going to explain how the Bears can win on Monday night and improve to 1-1 on the season. I am your host, Will DeWitt, and tonight I am accompanied by my two fellow Bears brothers, Brandon Hazlett and Nicholas Moriano. Gentlemen, how are you tonight?
Doing very, very well tonight.
Doing well, Will. I'm in a different place, but I got in there. We're doing the show, so I'm doing great.
Yeah, Nick, you've been having some internet issues at home, so you made it to one of your classrooms at the University of Iowa. So thank you for making appropriate accommodations. I appreciate it.
Hey, that means I'm not the only one to do a show in the classroom.
That's true. Next is me. Knock on wood, hopefully not. All right, guys. So coming up is Monday Night Football. It's a platform in which our Bears have shined on recent history as they are 13-4 on Monday Night Football since 2006, which, if you recall, dates back to the infamous Bears-Cardinals game, which obviously inspired the name of these shows. So let's get right to it, guys. Who are the Philadelphia Eagles? They're 1-0 on the year after beating the Browns at home. On offense, they had the league's 7th most yards with 403, and they scored the 8th most points, 29. And then on defense, they were 5th in yards allowed with only 288, and they only gave up 10 points, which is tied for 3rd best in the league. But that was against the Browns. So you have to take those stats with a grain of salt or multiple grains of salt. But either way, it proves that if you don't show up to play, the Eagles are going to take advantage. So good news for Bears fans is the Eagles are only 4-8 all-time at Soldier Field, and we all know Bears Nation's going to show up loud and proud on Monday night. So let's start with the Eagles offense. The Eagles had a balanced attack last week with 34 rushes and 37 passes, which allowed them to dominate time of possession, roughly a 40-20 split. But they were only 5 of 15 on third down. So obviously the Bears need to force them into some third down situations. But Brandon, let's start this off. Carson Wentz, he shined during his debut. How is he able to be so successful?
Because he's comfortable in the system and pressures with multiple teammates and with Doug Peterson himself. And Carson Wentz even said himself that, he's comfortable in the system and coach is letting him be aggressive. When they asked Josh Huff in the locker room presser, he said, one of the reporters asked those deep passes, like the touchdown pass to Aguilar, they said, is that him being aggressive, or was that in the game plan? Like, what's going on? And Josh Huff said, no, that's just Carson Wentz. So he's comfortable and he's being aggressive, just like coach has said. He went 22 of 37 last week for 278 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. Sacked twice. He had 101 passer rating. So he's really just comfortable in the system, and that's really all it takes for a good quarterback is if you know what you're doing and be confident what you're doing.
So what were they doing that game that kind of allowed him to be successful? Were they doing anything different that you might expect a team to do with the rookie quarterback?
Anything different? Not necessarily. What I did notice and watching tape is his snap to release count from where the ball snapped to when he passes on average was around 2 seconds. In both touchdown passes that he threw, his snap to release was under 2 seconds. And the longest that I counted he held the ball was 3.3 seconds, and he got hit after that. So he's doing a lot of 3-5-step drops, getting rid of the ball very quickly. And I think that's helping him grow confidence as the game goes on to be able to throw these like 35-yard touchdown passes like we'll talk about later. But just real quick 3-5-step drops, real quick snap to release points. That's pretty much how Carson Wentz has been able to go 22 of 37.
No, that makes total sense. And on top of that, of course, having that balanced attack with those 34 rushes as well definitely takes a load off for that rookie quarterback, helps him kind of just ease into that game a little bit. But, Nick, I want to ask you, how can the Bears slow down Wentz on Monday night?
Before I get into that, I have 2 stats for you guys.
All right.
One, the Bears are 9-1 against rookie quarterbacks at Soldier Field. That's a good thing. The other stat, teams that go 0-2 to start the season, only 12% of them have made the playoffs. So to say – I'm going to say it right now. Game 2 of the season is a must-win for the Bears. No doubt about it. With only 12% of teams making it, this is a must-win in Soldier Field on Monday night where the Bears have shined. But how can the Bears stop Wentz? They do a lot of quick passing, but I think if you pressure this quarterback, he's a rookie. The Iowa's actually playing North Dakota State. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting that that's happening this weekend, but they need to blitz Carson Wentz and get him uncomfortable early. The Bears only had 2 sacks last week against Houston Texans. So it's going to be crucial that they get Wentz off his game early and just keep applying pressure so he doesn't have that time to throw, even if they are going to be short passes.
No, that makes total sense. Who do you think would have to step up the most in this game? Do you think it has to be Eddie Goldman up the middle or some of these edge rushers, the DEs? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking it's got to be the edge rushers. I didn't hear a lot of Willie Young or Lamar Houston last game. We didn't see Young go fishing, so we need to see that. We need to see Houston. We need to see them make an impact in the game. I think our DNs need to have our outside linebackers need to have a pivotal game, have a good game in order to get Wentz off his game.
No, that makes good sense there, Nick. Brandon, so the receivers, they're obviously a question mark now with Ertz likely out. So looking at some of the targets that Wentz has, obviously they're led by Jordan Matthews, who had a whopping 14 targets last week. So can you give us some more insight on this group?
Yeah, Jordan Matthews had 14 targets, like you said, but he only had 7 receptions for 114 yards and a touchdown. Carson Wentz on both of his touchdown passes does a very good job of placing the ball accurately where the defenders have absolutely no chance of getting to the ball. That same with Nelson Aguilar, 35-yard touchdown pass over the shoulder, placed perfectly. There was one guy on his back pocket, and he had absolutely no chance of getting to the ball. So not only is Carson Wentz being accurate, but his receivers are running the routes very, very well. So how much they want to play, man-to-man or coverage the Bears on these guys, it's tough to tell. They did make a depth chart change. They put Dorial Green-Beckham in front of Josh Huff because Josh Huff was mostly absent against Cleveland, while Dorial Green-Beckham, he was quiet against Cleveland as well, but he had at least 2 receptions for 14 yards. Stepping up in a bigger role, I mean, that might help him improve more than 2 receptions. So I'm interested to see how that depth chart shakes things out.
And let's focus on those tight ends real quick. Like I said, Ertz is probably out with he has like a first rib displacement, which sounds pretty painful. So I definitely don't think he will give it a go on Monday night. But they have Brent Celek. What do you expect out of him on Monday?
Out of Brent Celek?
Celek, yeah, sorry.
That's all right. He had 1 reception for 11 yards against Cleveland. I did read earlier today that they may end up playing Trey Burton because they like him better in the passing game. But Brent Celek is a bigger guy like Zach Ertz. He's 6'4", 255. And they used a lot of the short underneath routes with Ertz, so I would expect the same thing from either Celek or Trey Burton, regardless who they play.
Right, yes. Celek is a longtime vet. I'm sure he'll find ways to be effective. Hopefully we can at least limit that in some ways. But Nick, looking at this, receiver group, tight end group, I think the Bears might have the edge in this matchup, but how do you think that the Bears corners and their entire secondary kind of matches up right now?
Well, I like Celek, and then against both inside linebackers, Freeman and Trevathan, I think they are able to cover whoever is playing the tight end position. And with our secondary, I think that Vic Fangio has to throw out different fronts, different mix-ups of defenses out there. Just because it's a rookie quarterback, he's not going to see as much. So confuse him early. Obviously, our corners and safeties have to do better at man-to-man coverage so they don't get beat deep. But play the receivers, jam on the line, just get them uncomfortable. With Kyle Fuller hopefully coming back, that's definitely going to be a big help.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And Bryce Callahan, I think they'll do all right, especially with Carson Wentz being back there and hopefully being confused with all the different defenses Vic Fangio throws at him.
Yeah, what do you think that the corners as a group needs to improve on the most compared to last week? For me, it's definitely turning around and locating the football when it's in the air.
I would say just staying with the guy because, I mean, they're on the one pass where Fuller dropped that wide open pass that could have gone for a touchdown. Tracy Porter wasn't even near the guy. So I think the guys just need to be at the receiver's hips and just stay with them. Despite there not being a pass rush, they need to stay with their receivers and just, make it a harder throw than, an easier throw.
To add to that, the receiving core here in Philadelphia is not as quick as Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins, so they should have an easier time staying with them and being able to turn around and locate the ball.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
obviously, the speed torched us last week, so that's really good to hear. So now let's take a look at the Eagles' running game. Brandon, how did they split up the carries in the backfield last week?
Barely. Ryan Matthews took most of the snaps. He had 22 attempts for 77 yards and a touchdown. An interesting thing that I found out, they ran 6 running plays to the left throughout the whole game. Just for Ryan Matthews, I didn't count either Darren Sproles or Barner because they only had 9 carries between the two of them. But Ryan Matthews looks like he's going to shoulder most of the load. His touchdown was scored running to the left with 1:16 left in the fourth quarter, though. So take that as you will. But I found that really interesting that they went to the right and up the middle more often than anything else. Maybe the Eagles showed us their hand.
Yeah, perhaps for sure. Nick, how do you think they can slow him down? Because, I mean, the Bears last week gave up 129 yards on the ground, and the Eagles put up similar numbers with 133 rushing yards last week. But I'm sure that the duo of Freeman and Trevathan, who combined for 28 combined tackles last week, they're going to be busy again in this one. But how do you think the Bears slow down that Eagles rushing attack?
I think for the ends and the outside linebackers, they have to keep everything inside the box. I do see Trevathan and Freeman also, having another big game just because, I mean, those guys are going to get tackles regardless of what happens. But definitely keep everything inside. And you got to, with whoever's playing nose tackle, whether it's Goldman or maybe they put Hicks in the middle, you have to fill up the hole, and just give your linebackers clear lanes to go and get the running backs.
No, that makes sense. Let's also go back real quick, Nick, to the Eagles being able to dominate time of possession and also having that, fairly balanced attack last week. If they're able to do that again, how is that going to affect this Bears defense?
Well, I mean, they're going to be out there on the field for a long time, and we saw what happened last time. They got gas at the end, and they bend. We talk about it all the time. They bend but don't break. But if you keep a defense out there for a long amount of time, they're eventually going to break. So it's going to be key that the Bears get off of the field on third downs, which they didn't do a very good job of last week. So they need to get off the field on third downs and give themselves a break.
For sure. All right, so let's switch gears and let's move on over here to the Eagles defense. And like I said earlier, they were 5th in yards allowed, only 288, and they only gave up 10 points, 3rd best in the league. But they did give up 120 yards on the ground on 21 carries, which is good for a 5.7 average. So perhaps this is an area that the Bears could exploit come Monday. But they were, on the other hand, very stingy against the pass. They were 5th best in the league with only 168 pass yards allowed. And RG3 only had a 55 passer rating and a 22.2 QBR. Also, currently, Jim Schwartz is the Eagles defensive coordinator. And when he was the Lions head coach, Cutler was 7-3 against him in his defenses. So that's just another stat that we should keep in the back of our mind. But Brandon, what made this defensive unit one of the best in the league last week, besides the fact that they were playing the Browns?
They played the Browns. There's obviously more to it than that. They held Cleveland to 2 of 10 on third downs. They forced an interception. It was a tip drill kind of interception. But mostly they were just tough. They have 2 guys last year who had over 100 tackles who are my guys to look out for. Fletcher Cox and Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins had 120 tackles last year, and Fletcher Cox had 104 last year. So I mean, they've got guys that can get the job done. I'd like to see how they obviously perform against the higher caliber offense with Jay Cutler and company instead of RG3 and Terrell Pryor.
All right, so let's take a look at that front 7, Brandon. What did they do last week in terms of getting to the backfield and making some impact plays?
They generated 3 sacks, one from Fletcher Cox, one from Brandon Graham, and one from Connor Barwin. So those are going to be the 3 guys up front of the 4. They run a 4-3 defense that you're going to want to watch out for. On the Fletcher Cox sack, he had a good bull rush from the guy next to him, Vinny Curry, to help set up the Fletcher Cox sack because his blocker couldn't move anymore because the bull rush was right behind him, so that allowed room for Fletcher Cox to get open. Connor Barwin just beats his guy around the edge, and Brandon Graham has good hands, forces the fumble, but it was covered by RG3, so he gets the sack and the forced fumble on that one. So, I mean, it's just speed on the front end mostly out of the front 4.
All right, so Nick, I have probably the question of the night for you. Obviously, the Bears' offensive line needs to improve on last week's outing. So how do you think they're going to fare against the Eagles' front 7?
Well, I think they'll do a lot better than they did, last week. The Houston Texans like to run a lot of stunts, which is basically rushers just crossing the face of the offensive lineman, just going and replacing defensive linemen where they once were. And last week, the Eagles only ran 3 stunts against the Browns. Of course, watching the film, they probably will run more against the Bears, but that's a good sign because with the Bears offensive line still, getting together, trying to gel, they, of course, seeing stunts is going to throw them off. So I think this week, having another week under their belt, probably not going to see as much stunts. They don't have Eagles don't have the athletes that the Houston Texans do on the front seven, the line will hold up and do a far better job than they did a week ago. You'll see that. Watch.
For me, and actually Brendan Robinson, our blog writer, he pointed out a couple of matchups on our front line that we need to probably discuss here real quick. Bobby Massey versus Connor Barwin and Josh Sitton versus Fletcher Cox. Brandon, I know you have some insight on both of Cox and Barwin. How do you think they're going to kind of match up against those Bears offensive linemen?
I'm not too concerned about the Connor Barwin matchup. He didn't necessarily do a whole lot. The leading tackler for Philadelphia last week had 5 total tackles. So there's either a lot of dispersity in tackles or there's just one guy who's getting off 5 tackles for the team.
Here's what I'm thinking real quick. Actually, I want to bring this up because I too noted that the Eagles' tackling numbers were low.
Yes.
But I think that's more of the fact that they were rarely on the field and their offense was on the field for the majority of that game. So that's why you're going to see such a low number on that tackling stat for sure. But continue.
So the guy that I'm more worried about is Fletcher Cox because he led the team last year with 9.5 sacks. He led the team in tackles for a loss with 16.5, quarterback hurries with 32, and he had 3 forced fumbles, all leading the team in sacks, tackles for loss, quarterback hurries, and forced fumbles. So I think he poses more of a threat. He's one of the more prominent guys up the middle that Philadelphia has had in their history. So I would watch out for that matchup more than I would with Connor Barwin.
Nick, out of all the Bears offensive linemen, which one are you most worried about coming into this game?
Most worried about? I'm going to go with, I'll go with Charles Leno Jr. just because he did struggle last game. I think Whitehair plays a lot better with Sin next to him. Just kind of had that another week under their belt to kind of gel and mesh up. But I'm going to see with Charles Leno Jr. what he does this week. I think Massey's going to do fine on his side. Long, I'm not worried about it at all. And I think Leno's the guy to watch this week to see how he does.
All right, so let's switch over here and let's talk about this Eagles secondary, Brandon. They only had 4 cornerbacks on the active roster last game, and they might be going without their top corner, Leodis McKelvin is how I'm going to pronounce it, which makes them extremely thin at the position. So, Brandon, I think that this could be huge for the Bears, especially with Alshon not having to go toe-to-toe against their top corner. So how does the loss of McKelvin impact the Eagles' strategy, and who's going to possibly suit up in his place?
Well, Philadelphia has said they are going to use in-house players to replace McKelvin. They're not going to go out and find anybody, and I don't believe they're going to bring anybody up from the practice squad to replace him. So you're either looking at Jalen Mills, rookie drafted in the 7th round of this year, or the 5-year vet, Ron Brooks. We'll know closer to game time who it's going to be. I can't imagine that their strategy is going to change a whole lot. It looked like they played a lot of man-to-man, but there was also like the interception that they had was in a coverage set. So we'll see a little bit of both. It looked like they were totally fine in man coverage. They matched up against Terrell Pryor, who's 6'4", just fine. Whether or not they can do that with 2 guys that are 6'3" or so, that's yet to be determined. So I think definitely take advantage of Jalen Mills if he's going to play, or you could even take advantage of Ron Brooks because if he's I don't know what his playing time was last week, but if he's going to step into a starter's role and expect to replace McKelvin's shoes, then we definitely have to take advantage of that.
Speaking of taking advantage, Nick, how can the Bears take advantage of those matchups?
I mean, the Bears should be licking their chops right now, hearing that their top corner is going to be gone, and you have possibly a rookie or
a 7th round rookie,
a seventh round rookie. Surprised he's still on the team, but Alshon Jeffrey, Kevin White, I like that matchup all day. I think Alshon Jeffrey can go against one-on-one with anybody and win that matchup. So I think Jay Cutler needs to go there often because maybe that trust is not there with Kevin White yet. Hopefully they get it this game, but. Jeffrey with whoever he's lined up against is going to be a mismatch the entire game for me.
Do you have like an X factor in that receiving core? Do you think Eddie Royal has a possibility of a big game?
Yeah, I think maybe not even Eddie Royal, maybe Zach Miller. We need to see him get involved. He only had maybe one catch, I believe, last week. So I think they need to get him more involved and get him, out there and just getting some passes, get some plays thrown his way.
Yeah, and
it would be pretty cool to call Zach Miller Mr. Monday Night after his performance last year in the one-handed catch.
Monday Night Miller, something along those lines. I like it. That I wanted to bring that up. Like, obviously, he came up to play down the stretch against the Chargers last year on Monday night. So I'm hoping to see another highlight play out of our tight end coming in this one. Brandon, before we do a quick hit on special teams, do you have any other insight on the Eagles secondary?
Just Malcolm Jenkins is the other guy to watch out for. He finished first on the team last year with 120 tackles. He also forced 3 fumbles last year, and he was second on the team in tackles for a loss with 13. So Malcolm Jenkins and Fletcher Cox, as the defense as a whole, are really the 2 guys to watch out for. But overall, for the defense, I wouldn't. If the Bears are planning for this game, which I hope they are, I don't know why I said if. When the Bears are planning for this game, don't give the Eagles the opportunity to make the defensive play because they'll do it. The leading tackler had 5 tackles against Cleveland. That's, like we said, because, they only had 8 plays in the first quarter, Cleveland did, so they only had 20 minutes playing on offense all game. I think that's going to increase a little bit, but it's hard to gauge how they're going to play with a better offense in week 2. So I frankly like the Bears in this matchup, offense, defense.
Yeah, of course, like I said, plenty of grains of salt for this Eagles team when they're going up against the Browns week 1. So let's move on to special teams, guys. I just have some stats I just kind of want to roll through here, then perhaps your insight on them real quick. So, first and foremost, obviously we all hope to see Connor Barth and that he sees a little bit more action, this week. Hopefully, if we are in field goal range and it's 4th and 1 and we can extend the lead to 10 points, I think we should probably do that. I think we learned our lesson last week. Our punter, Patrick Megapunt O'Donnell, he needs to work on his punting average. He had 7 punts, but only a 42.3 yard average with a long of 47, which, you can say that was because of the shortened field, but only 2 of his 7 punts made it within the 20. And he didn't have any touchback. So he needs to, pin these Eagles deep, make some long drives for Carson Wentz. I think that is going to be a key in this game to keep field position in our favor instead of keeping, last week when we were losing time of possession, starting to lose the field position. We need to keep that in our advantage. And for the Eagles, kicker Caleb Sturgis, he was 3 for 3 in his extra points last week, but he was only 2 for 3 in his field goals. He missed a 46-yarder, so that's something to keep an eye out for. And then our punter, Donnie Jones, he had a long punt of 72 last week, and he had a 49.2 average, which obviously is probably a little bit skewed there, but 3 out of his 6 punts were within the 20, and the other 3 were touchbacks. So obviously he's at least getting the ball down there, attempting to pin, opponents deep, so we need to make sure that we're not allowing him to do that. Hopefully we can make him punt from some longer distances, or else he is going to pin the Bears into some really, deep into their own territory. So out of those stats, do you guys have any other insight to what they might mean? I think I explained them fairly well, but if you have any other insight, let me know.
I believe you said Cleveland had no kick or punt return yards last week.
Yeah, right before the show, I did say that they didn't have any kick returns. They didn't have any punt returns. So obviously a lot of touchbacks all around.
That would be something to watch out for, whether that be coverage on punt returns or them just kicking the ball deep on kickoffs. Just things to watch out for, because I was going to make a bold prediction that Deontay Thompson would take a touchdown back off the kick, but looking at those stats, I don't think that's likely. So those are just things to watch out for in special teams, I think.
Sounds good. All right, guys. So let's go around the horn and give our game predictions. Real quick, recap our standings on the season. It's pretty simple. We're like the Bears. We're all 0-1 on the season, which is okay. Have plenty of games to go here. I'll go ahead and start with my prediction. I have the Bears winning this one 24-21. Last second kick by Connor Barth. He makes it, and everyone feels much more comfortable about the Bears kicking situation. Brandon?
I have the Bears winning in a defensive battle, 17-10. I think the Bears win time of possession, but I think maybe the Eagles' defense steps up a little bit more, knowing that they're going against somebody other than the Browns, and our offense has been a little stagnant, and I'm going to kind of keep it that way until I'm proven otherwise.
All right, Nick?
I got the Bears 24, Eagles 17. I think the offensive line gels, gives Jay Cutler time to throw. Defense shows up, and it's Monday Night Football, so they're going to go out and get John Fox's second win in Soldier Field.
Well, there we go. So let's switch over now to the fan poll results that we submitted here on Twitter. You can follow us at the Bears Bros. Out of nearly 150 votes by Bears fans, 65% have the Bears winning by 6+. So obviously, despite that Week 1 loss to the Texans, after a few days of rest, Bears fans are still pretty optimistic about this team, especially in this matchup on Monday night. So before we close, let's finish off, guys. Like Brandon, you kind of hinted at this a few seconds ago. Bold predictions, and I'm going to go ahead and let you start, B. What's yours?
Well, it's not Deontay Thompson taking a kickback for touchdown. I said before the show that it was going to be a Kadeem Carey, as president of the Kadeem Carey fan club, gets his first touchdown of the season, but I think I want to change it last minute again to DeAndre Houston Carson gets his first block kick of the year. I think that'd be fun to see on Monday night.
That would be fun to see.
Definitely.
Geez, I don't know. He might be demoted to vice president now for that Kadeem Carey fan club. But let's move on. Nick, what's your bold prediction?
My bold prediction is that Kevin White gets his first career NFL touchdown.
That's pretty bold considering last week.
It is.
It's okay. Mine's a little bit bolder here. Mine, Adrian Amos is going to get his first career interception. Long overdue. So I'm hoping that he can definitely pull that one out for me. I would feel quite proud of my second-year safety. So really, guys, I think that's it. I think we covered pretty much all the basics there for the Eagles, got everybody caught up. So that's all we have for you tonight. I want to thank you all for watching live or listening to the podcast. I want you all, to enjoy your Sunday as we all have to wait until Monday night for this game. And hopefully, I hope that wait's worth it. So for Brandon and Nicholas, I'm Will DeWitt. We will talk to you immediately after the game on Monday night. It's going to be a late one, but we don't care, especially if it's after a Bears win. Until then, you know what to do. Bear down, Chicago.